Check my clock, I can't stop. Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Boruto episode 190. Alright guys, this episode right here was definitely a very chill episode. I do want to talk about Kawaki though. I mean, this right here had to be like one of the worst situations a man could actually be in. After he just escaped a prison, he's basically entering another prison. Now of course you understand, as fans of the Boruto series, we understand that it's not necessarily a quote-unquote prison, but in the perspective of Kawaki, like, it just seems to be absolutely terrible. First you go from an abusive father, then you go to another situation where you're literally like a prisoner, and of course you're fighting for your life at that particular point, man, because you don't know exactly who's actually taking care of you, and now you're just basically in the unknown, strapped in a room with handcuffs on, and no one's really giving you a lot of answers. That right there has to be a very, very difficult scene for Kawaki, and of course Kawaki being extremely upset, that's completely understandable. One thing that people don't necessarily understand is that Kawaki doesn't necessarily have a very good childhood like a lot of the other people have, so of course Kawaki just automatically trusting people is not necessarily going to be something very realistic. So of course Kawaki's probably not going to trust Boruto, he's not going to trust Sumire, he's not going to trust Mitsuki or Sarada at this particular time. It's probably going to take a lot of time for Kawaki and them to actually build up that trust, and of course the episode portrayed that in a very good way. And on top of that, Kawaki isn't necessarily too sure that the people who are actually having him locked up right now aren't necessarily connected to the Kado organization in some actual way. If you guys do recall, back when Kawaki actually did see Boruto's karma seal, he was then almost like 100% sure that Boruto was actually a part of the Kado organization. So because of that, you can't necessarily fault Kawaki for his movements and his motions, and of course you have to understand where he's coming from. Now an interesting thing that I did see in this episode is the fact that Kawaki can't necessarily use his karma seal. Now this right here is very different from the Boruto manga. In the Boruto manga, we understood that Kawaki could actually use his karma seal whenever he wanted to. We thought that Kawaki just understood how to activate his karma seal. As of right now, Boruto doesn't necessarily know how to activate his karma seal. Boruto can't activate his karma seal at will, but from what we've seen in the previous episodes, it seemed like Kawaki can actually do that. But because of this episode right here, we now have to actually question if Kawaki can actually activate his karma seal on command. Now of course I do have to point out there's definitely a possibility that Kawaki is just weakened, and that's the reason why Kawaki isn't necessarily able to activate his karma seal. But it's just very interesting to actually think about. Sumire in this episode was actually amazing. She did her part. Now of course I do expect to see Sumire in the next couple episodes, especially because it seems like Kawaki and Sumire are building some sort of bond. But I ain't gonna lie to you guys, in this episode right here, I thought Sumire was gonna put Kawaki in a pack. A lot of people forget Sumire was literally like a top 3 academy student. We just don't necessarily know how much she's grown since then, but regardless, what we do understand is that Sumire is definitely a very strong character. And of course Kawaki thought that Sumire was just gonna be complete fodder. Nah bruh, that's not the situation. But one of the more important storylines with Sumire is still prevalent to this day. It's the fact that she can't necessarily control the new way. Now in terms of when I actually think she'd be able to control the new way, I don't necessarily think she'd be able to control the new way at this particular point. Right now I feel like the new way is like a kid. I know it's kind of cute seeing the new way, well the small new way at least, run around and basically saying new way stuff like that, but because the new way is so young as of right now, he's probably not going to be as mature as he is in the future. Now this is not necessarily confirmed, it's not necessarily set in stone, but I'm pretty sure you guys recall the summoning jutsus that we did see, especially the summoning jutsus that we did see from Naruto, Gamakichi. He was extremely small when Naruto was about 13 years old, but in just 3 years the summoning jutsu grew a lot bigger. Now I am expecting that growth from the new way, not only in size but also in maturity, so in the future we could possibly assume that the new way is actually going to actually be able to control himself, and of course Sumire is going to be able to control the new way as well. But one of the things to this day that is still absolutely true is that the new way is still a very strong summoning jutsu. It's not necessarily the strongest summoning jutsu. It's not on Garaga's tier. The OG Boruto fans will know who Garaga is, but regardless, this new way is still definitely a very good summoning jutsu, which pretty much damn near brought Kawaki to his knees. I think in that particular situation, if Sumire actually wanted to, she could have actually killed Kawaki, which is actually insane. Now Sumire's relationship to Kawaki is going to be something that we have to monitor very, very closely. I think something that Kawaki said definitely resonates to Sumire is the fact that Kawaki did actually say that Sumire was a monster as well. Now Kawaki himself, I'm pretty sure Kawaki refers to himself as a monster, but of course seeing Sumire have the control of the new way, which is pretty much a monster, and Sumire being a very adept shinobi, Kawaki actually did mention Sumire being a monster as well. Now in the future, I'm pretty sure that Sumire and Kawaki, they're probably gonna have a heart-to-heart conversation where Kawaki spills out his backstory, Sumire spills out her backstory, and because we understand how sad Sumire's backstory is, they're probably gonna build some sort of bond from that, which is probably gonna be a very, very good addition for the Boruto writers. Now Kawaki did escape, Now in this particular situation, you pretty much understood it. You pretty much got the feeling that Kawaki was definitely going to escape sometime in this episode. It was just a matter of time. Some people might not necessarily feel that way, but I thought Kawaki was definitely going to escape, not just because I read the spoilers for this episode, but you guys get the point. Kawaki in this episode is pretty much extremely resourceful. He did everything that he could have possibly done to actually escape, but the question for Kawaki is, what does he do right now? I mean, Kawaki is in a very difficult position. He's trying to run away from Boruto and everybody else. He's trying to not get caught by the Kata insiders, all while not being able to heal his wounds, and all while being extremely hungry. That right there is definitely going to be a very sticky situation for Kawaki himself. Now, Naruto is actually heading to the research facility, and of course, by the preview, Naruto is actually already at the research facility. Obviously, Boruto meeting Kawaki is going to be something that's going to be super hyped up, and hopefully they do it the right way. I'm pretty sure their relationship is definitely going to be a very, very good one, especially because of the fact that Naruto has Kage level talk no jutsu. He's going to talk anybody down and pretty much make them his friend. I strongly doubt the situation with Kawaki is going to be any different. But real quick, I do want to actually talk about if this episode right here is actually filler. Now, in my opinion, I think that majority of the anime only episodes are not actually filler. I think a lot of them are canon, but of course, we didn't necessarily further any more information about the Kata organization and anything like that. This doesn't necessarily tell me if it's actually filler. What will actually tell me if it's filler is if in the future this episode doesn't necessarily have any bearings on the actual event. So for example, not just this episode, but of course the episodes in between the actual next chapter that we do get to see adapted. If these episodes have a long-lasting effect on Kawaki, then I do consider these canon episodes. So for example, if you guys do recall back when Naruto and everybody else fought against Zabuza, that right there didn't necessarily have anything to do with the actual Akatsuki and the Akatsuki gaining the ability to actually acquire Tailed Beast. But of course, it did have a very long-lasting effect on Naruto and the rest of Team 7. It basically showed them exactly what a shinobi is really like in the real world. And because that arc in a whole had such a long-lasting effect on Naruto and the rest of Team 7, of course, that right there is not considered filler. Of course, it wouldn't necessarily be considered filler anyway, mainly because that arc in itself was actually in the Boruto manga, but you guys get my point. But I do think this episode right here was definitely a very decent episode. It wasn't anything too crazy, it just gave us a lot more character development for Kawaki, and of course actually added in Sumire as well. So of course for me it was definitely a decent episode. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. What was your opinions about this episode? Did you guys like it? What was your favorite part about this episode? But it's me, your boy Baara B, and we out.
It's a knife.